Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. If you cannot even pour wine without trembling, you are of no use to me. Get out of my sight before I have you thrown to the hounds. The crystal goblet shattered against the obsidian wall, the sound echoing like a gunshot through the silent, cavernous dining hall. Red wine dripped down the intricate wallpaper like fresh blood, a stark contrast to the pale, trembling figure of Rinsini. He stood with his head bowed, his hands shaking violently behind his back, forcing himself to breathe through the suffocating pressure of the alpha pheromones crushing the air out of the room. At the head of the table sat Lord Dante Vesper, the patriarch of the Vesper Syndicate and the self-proclaimed king of the northern sector. He was a man sculpted from ice and violence, his silver eyes narrowing as he looked at Ren not as a person, but as a stain on his pristine floor. Ren bit the inside of his cheek until he tasted copper, fighting the urge to sob. "I apologize, my lord. It won't happen again." "It won't," Dante said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that vibrated in Ren's chest. "Because you are dismissed from service in the main hall. You are a defective creature, Ren. A beta with no scent, no spine, and no purpose. Go to the stables. Perhaps you can be useful shoveling filth, since you seem so fond of acting like it." Ren didn't dare look up. He turned on his heel, his worn shoes squeaking on the marble, and fled the room, the heavy oak doors slamming shut behind him, sealing away the monster in the suit. Rinsini was not a beta. He was an omega, born of a disgraced lineage that had been hunted to near extinction by the Vesper family 2 decades ago. For 19 years, he had lived a life of shadow and deception. His mother, before her execution, had dosed him with the shroud, an illegal, experimental chemical suppressant that didn't just mask an omega's scent. It buried it deep within the marrow, locking away the pheromones and the biology of his secondary gender. To the world, and to the terrifyingly powerful alpha nose of Dante Vesper, Ren smelled like nothing, like dust, like static air. In a world dictated by biological hierarchy, to be scentless was to be soulless. It was why Dante despised him. To the Alpha King, whose senses were honed for war and dominance, Ren was an anomaly that frustrated his predatory instincts. He couldn't read Ren, couldn't dominate him with a flare of pheromones, and that silence irritated the beast within him. Ren retreated to the servants' quarters, a stark, cold room in the basement of the Vesper Manor. He collapsed onto his narrow cot, his heart hammering against his ribs. He reached under his mattress and pulled out a small, rusted tin. It was empty. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced his chest. The shroud pills. He had taken the last one yesterday. He shook the tin, praying for a forgotten fragments, but only silence answered him. He had been trying to procure more from the black market dealer in the lower city, but the estate had been on lockdown due to the upcoming winter solstice gala. He had calculated he could last another 2 days. But the stress of the dining hall, the terror of Dante's rage, it was burning through his system faster than usual. A cramp seized his abdomen, doubling him over. It wasn't the usual ache of hunger. This was a deep, molten twisting in his gut. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. The shroud was failing. And if the heat hit him now, within the walls of the Alpha King's stronghold, there would be no escape. The Vesper estate was a fortress of glass and steel built into the side of a snowy mountain, overlooking the glittering, dystopian sprawl of the city below. Tonight, the fortress was alight with gold and crimson. The winter solstice gala was the most important political event of the year. Alphas from rival syndicates, high-born omegas draped in silk and diamonds, and betas serving as the grease to the wheels of society filled the grand ballroom. Run had hoped to stay hidden in the stables as ordered, but the head steward, a harried beta named Marcus, had dragged him out. "We are short-staffed," Marcus had hissed, shoving a fresh waiter's uniform into Ren's arms. "Lord Vesper fired 3 servers this morning for looking him in the eye. I don't care if you're on stable duty. Put this on, keep your head down and keep the champagne flowing. And for God's sake, Don't smell like manure. Ren had no choice. He washed quickly, the cold water doing little to soothe the growing fever under his skin. He felt dizzy. Everything was too loud, too bright. The uniform, a high-collared white suit, felt constricting, like a second skin shrinking around him. He entered the ballroom, tray in hand. The air was thick with the scent of perfumes, expensive cologne, and the underlying musk of posturing alphas. It was a sensory assault. To a hidden omega whose suppressants were fading, it was like walking into a furnace. Dante Vesper stood at the top of the grand staircase, surveying his kingdom. He wore a tuxedo of midnight velvet, a sapphire brooch pinned to his lapel. He looked regal, lethal, and utterly bored. Beside him stood Julian, a high-born omega from the southern territories. Julian was beautiful in the conventional sense. Delicate, smelling of rosewater and vanilla, and practically hanging off Dante's arm. Dante looked detached, his eyes scanning the crowd with predatory disinterest. He didn't want a partner, he wanted an alliance. Julian was merely the most tolerable option presented to him. Ren moved through the crowd, offering drinks, his vision swimming. He felt a sudden, sharp spike of heat in his lower back, forcing a small gasp from his lips. "Watch it, trash," a guest sneered as Ren bumped into him. Ren mumbled an apology, retreating toward the shadows of a large pillar. He needed to leave. Now, the heat wasn't just creeping up, it was crashing down like a tidal wave. His scent glands, dormant for his entire life, were waking up with a violence that made his knees buckle. He dropped the tray. The crash of crystal was the second time that day. But this time, in the middle of the crowded ballroom, it silenced the music. Hundreds of eyes turned to him. Ren fell to his knees, clutching his chest. He couldn't breathe. The air in the room suddenly felt thin. "Get him out of here," Marcus's voice hissed from somewhere nearby. "He's sick." But before the guards could move, a change occurred in the atmosphere. It started as a subtle shift, a ripple in the air that made the hairs on the back of every alpha's neck stand up. The shroud had broken. It didn't happen gradually. It was an explosion. A scent, unlike anything the modern world had known, burst forth from the trembling figure on the floor. It wasn't the cloying sweetness of rose or vanilla. It was ancient and intoxicating. It smelled of night-blooming jasmine, crushed ozone before a thunderstorm, and the dark, sweet tang of wild honey. It was the scent of a prime omega, a rarity not seen in a century. The reaction was instantaneous. Every alpha in the room froze, their pupils dilating. The primitive part of their brains, usually buried under layers of civility and politics, snapped to the surface. Growls rippled through the crowd. At the top of the stairs, Dante Vesper went rigid. He had been listening to Julian drone on about summer estates when the scent hit him. It was like a physical blow to the chest, staggering him. It bypassed his logic, his cold cruelty, and went straight to the core of his biology. His inner beast, usually a leashed monster, roared with a hunger that eclipsed anything he had ever felt. Mate. The word wasn't a thought. It was a command burned into his DNA. Dante's eyes snapped to the center of the room. He saw the useless beta servant on his knees, clutching his own throat, surrounded by glass. But Dante didn't see a servant anymore. He saw the only thing that mattered. A large, brutish alpha from the Iron Syndicate, a man named Goran, was the first to move. Overcome by the scent, Goran lunged toward Ren, his eyes glazed with lust. "Mine," he growled, reaching out a meaty hand to grab Ren's hair. "Don't touch me," Ren screamed, his voice cracking, but his limbs were like water. Goran's hand was inches from Ren's face when a blur of midnight velvet descended from the staircase. There was a sickening crunch of bone. The entire ballroom gasped. Dante Vesper had vaulted over the railing, landing in a crouch between Ren and the aggressor. With a speed that defied the eye, Dante had caught Goran's wrist and snapped it like a dry twig. Dante stood, releasing the howling man and kicking him backward into the crowd with enough force to knock over a table. "Everyone." Dante's voice was not a shout. but a low, vibrating growl that shook the chandeliers above. It was the voice of the king, infused with absolute crushing dominance. Out! Silence stretched for a heartbeat, and then chaos ensued. The sheer pressure of Dante's aura was suffocating. Guests scrambled for the exits, terrified of the murderous intent radiating from the host. Run was gasping on the floor, the heat consuming him. He felt like he was burning alive. He squeezed his eyes shut, expecting death. He had lied. He had hidden. Dante would kill him for this deception. He felt a presence loom over him. The air grew heavy, smelling of cedarwood, cold rain, and gunsmoke. Dante's scent. It was surrounding him, wrapping around him, suffocating the other smells in the room. Ren flinched as a hand touched his shoulder. "Look at me," Dante commanded. The voice was rough, strained. Ren shook his head, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I said, look at me." Ren forced his eyes open. He expected to see the cold, gray steel of an executioner. Instead, he saw silver fire. Dante's pupils were blown wide, encompassing nearly the entire iris. The man was panting, his composure shattered. Dante dropped to his knees. The Alpha King, who bowed to no one, who had called Ren worthless filth hours ago, fell to the floor amidst the broken glass and spilled champagne. He didn't care about the shards cutting into his expensive trousers. Dante reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and cupped Ren's jaw. His touch was shockingly gentle, a stark contrast to the violence he had just displayed. He brought his face close to Ren's neck, inhaling deeply, shuddering as the scent of jasmine and ozone filled his lungs. "You," Dante whispered, the words sounding like a prayer. "You were right here, all this time, right under my nose." "Lord Vesper, please," Ren sobbed, the heat making him delirious. "Please don't kill me." Dante pulled back, his expression twisting with a confusion of rage and adoration. "Kill you?" He let out a dark, jagged laugh. "I would burn this city to ash before I let a single hair on your head be harmed." He scooped Ren up into his arms, lifting him as easily as if he were made of paper. Ren instinctively curled into the warmth, his biology recognizing the Alpha Prime. Where are we going?" Ren murmured, his consciousness fading as the fever took hold. "To my chambers," Dante growled, stepping over the debris, carrying his prize toward the private elevators. "You are in heat, little one, and you are going to endure it with me." The next 3 days were a blur of fever, darkness, and skin. Ren's heat, suppressed for years, was violent and exhausting. But he was not alone. Dante never left the room. There was no cruelty in the Alpha now. The arrogance was replaced by an obsessive, terrifying devotion. When Ren cried out in pain from the cramps, Dante was there to massage him. When Ren burned with fever, Dante was there with cool cloths. And when the instinct to mate became unbearable, Dante was there to answer it, though he held himself back from the final claim, the bite. Dante knew that Ren's mind was clouded. He refused to mark him while he was delirious. It was a surprising act of honor from a man known for taking what he wanted. On the morning of the 4th day, the fever broke. Ren woke up in a bed that was larger than his entire childhood apartment. The sheets were silk charcoal gray. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the snow-capped peaks. Memory rushed back to him. The Gala, the scent, Dante. He shot up in bed, heart racing. He was naked, washed, and dressed in one of Dante's oversized dress shirts. The door to the balcony opened, and Dante stepped in. He was holding a tray with tea and toast. He looked tired, the shadows under his eyes dark, but his gaze, when it landed on Ren, was intense enough to scorch. "You're awake," Dante said, setting the tray on the bedside table. Ren scrambled backward against the headboard, pulling his knees to his chest. "My lord, Stop," Dante said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Do not call me that. Not anymore. I deceived you," Ren whispered, his voice hoarse. I am an Omega. I know the law. Deception of a syndicate leader is punishable by death. Dante watched him for a long moment. Why did you hide? Because of who I am, Ren admitted, looking down at his hands. My last name isn't just Cine. Seraphine. Dante went still. The Seraphine line was the old royal family of the Omegas, deposed and hunted because their blood was said to carry the power to command Alphas, to strip them of their will. A Seraphine Omega was a weapon of war. I see, Dante said quietly. You thought I would use you, or sell you. You called me worthless, Ren said, a spark of old hurt flaring up. You treated me like garbage because I had no scent. Dante flinched. It was a small movement, but on a man of stone it was monumental. He reached out, his hand hovering near Ren's knee before retracting. I did, Dante admitted, his voice low. I have spent my life surrounding myself with strength. I viewed your silence, your perceived weakness, as an insult to my world. I was. He paused, struggling with the words. I was a fool. He looked at Ren, his silver eyes burning with sincerity. When your scent hit me, Ren, it didn't just trigger my lust, triggered my soul. I felt the missing piece of myself snap into place. The cruelty I showed you. It is my greatest shame. Ren looked at him, stunned. The Alpha King was apologizing? So what happens now? Ren asked cautiously. Do I go back to the stables? Dante let out a sharp, incredulous breath. The stables? Ren, you are my mate. You are the Vesper consort. You own this house as much as I do. No one will ever look down on you again. If they do, I will remove their eyes. Ren shivered. It was a promise of violence, but it was wrapped in a blanket of protection. I haven't agreed to be your mate, Ren said, finding a sudden, surprising thread of courage. Biology isn't consent, Dante. Just because we are fated doesn't mean I forgive you. Dante's eyes widened slightly, and then, a slow, dangerous smirk curved his lips. It wasn't a mock. It was approval. Good, Dante said, leaning in, bracing his hands on the mattress on either side of Ren, trapping him. I prefer a challenge. I don't want a servant. Ren, I want a partner who can stand the weight of my crown. Make me work for it. Make me beg. Ren swallowed hard, his heart fluttering. And if I say no? Then I will spend every day for the rest of my life proving to you that you are the most valuable thing in this world, until you say yes. The peace did not last. 2 weeks later, the news of the true Omega at the Vesper estate had leaked. The rival syndicate, the Red Vipers, decided to strike. They didn't want to kill Dante. They wanted to steal Ren. A Seraphine Omega could tip the balance of power in the entire region. It happened at night. An explosion rocked the west wing of the manor. Dante was in the study with Ren, showing him the layout of the syndicate's business operations, keeping his promise to treat him as an equal, when the alarm blared. Stay here, Dante commanded, pulling a heavy silver pistol from his desk drawer. Lock the door. I'm not hiding anymore, Ren said, standing up. His heat had passed, and with it his timidity. The blood of the Seraphine line was waking up. They are here for me, aren't they? Ren, this isn't a debate. Give me a gun, Dante. Dante looked at him, frustration warring with pride. He grabbed a smaller, sleek black pistol and shoved it into Ren's hand. If anyone comes through that door who isn't me, you shoot. Center mass. Do not hesitate. Dante vanished into the corridor. Gunfire erupted. Ren could hear the screams of guards and the roar of Dante's alpha voice commanding his troops. Ren waited, his grip on the gun white-knuckled. Suddenly, the vent cover in the ceiling blew off. 2 men in black tactical gear dropped into the room. Red Vipers. There he is. One hissed, lunging for Ren. Ren didn't think. He didn't tremble. He raised the gun and fired. The recoil jarred his arm, but the bullet took the assailant in the shoulder, spinning him around. The second man tackled Ren. The gun skittered across the floor. Ren kicked and scratched, but the alpha was too heavy. He felt a needle prick his neck, a sedative. Got him, the man grunted into his comms. Suddenly, the heavy oak door imploded. Dante stood there, covered in blood that wasn't his own. He saw the man on top of Rin. Dante didn't use a gun. He didn't use his fists. He unleashed his pheromones. It was a concentrated blast of killing intent. It was so potent that the air visibly shimmered. The red viper on top of Rin screamed, clutching his head, blood pouring from his nose as his brain scrambled under the sheer pressure of a prime alpha's rage. Dante crossed the room in a blur, grabbing the man by the throat and hurling him through the glass window, out into the snowy night and the 1,000-foot drop below. Dante fell to his knees beside Ren, panic wild in his eyes. Ren! Run! Look at me! Ren felt heavy, the sedative working fast. I shot one, he slurred, pointing to the groaning man in the corner. Dante looked at the wounded assassin, then back at Ren. He pulled Ren into his chest, burying his face in Ren's neck. You did? Dante whispered fiercely into his hair. You did perfectly. I've got you. I've got you. Ren woke up in the hospital wing of the manor. The sedative had been weak. The adrenaline had burned through most of it. Dante was sitting in a chair beside the bed, holding Ren's hand. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, though it had only been hours. The vipers? Ren asked, his voice raspy. Eradicated, Dante said simply. The finality in his tone implied a massacre. I sent their leader's head back to the south in a box. Ren squeezed Dante's hand. You came back for me. I will always come back for you. Dante brought Ren's hand to his lips, kissing the knuckles. I realized something tonight. What? The prophecy about the Seraphine line, Dante murmured. They said you were weak, that you needed to be hidden. But you fought. You held your own until I could get there. Dante stood up and leaned over the bed. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a profound, terrifying vulnerability. I called you a worthless omega, Dante said, his voice breaking on the words. But tonight, I was the one brought to my knees by the fear of losing you. You are the alpha of this relationship, Ren. You hold my heart, my sanity, and my life in your hands. Ren reached up, touching the sharp line of Dante's cheekbone. Does this mean the king surrenders? Dante closed his eyes, leaning into the touch. The king surrendered the moment he smelled jasmine in a room full of poison. I am yours, Ren. Body, blood, and empire. Ren smiled, pulling the powerful alpha down until their foreheads touched. Then you better start making up for all that time I spent in the stables. I intend to, Dante promised, closing the distance between their lips. Starting now. And that is how the viper tamed the wolf. If you enjoyed seeing Ren take control of his destiny and his alpha, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments. Would you forgive a husband who treated you like a servant before realizing you were his soulmate? Could you ever trust him again? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,